So today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia Daf Mem, dedicated for Yeshua, for Am Yisrael, it's all for the Shvuyim, Shmira for the Chayalim. It says the Mishnah, Mem Amid Aleph, Hamafke Peros Eitzel Chaveros, somebody who deposits Peros. Peros here doesn't mean fruit, it means like wheat, barley, with his friend, Hareze Yotzilo Chasronos. So when he returns it, we could assume that there was typical depreciation. And so therefore he's allowed, he doesn't have to return everything. He could take away some of it. How much? Ores for wheat and for rice, tisha chatzai kabin, 9.5 kabin for each core. Which is around 2.5%. With sorin udochen for barley and for millet, tisha kabin a core, 9 kabin for core. With klusmin for spelt, was zarapishtan or for flaxseed, shalosh sein liquor, around 3 seah for each core, which is a little bit more. So the Gemara says, "Hakol fi amida, hakol fi azman." Everything goes according to the measure. It means say that if there's more, then you deduct more, and if there's less, deduct less. Hakol fi azman. It also depends on the time of the year that it's in. It says Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and what does the mice care how much you have? They're going to eat what they're going to eat. The mice don't care. Excuse me. Whether you have a lot or a little, the mouse is going to eat what the mouse is going to eat. You only deduct for the first core. After that, you don't have more deductions. Rabbi Yehuda says, Yehuda gives a third position. He says, if there is a large amount, you're not going to be able to deduct, because when there's a large amount, then it's going to expand and it's going to swell up, because the way the Rashi explains it is that the depositor gives them to him in the summer, and then they're dry, and so then he takes the fruits back in the rainy season when they swell up, and so therefore this swelling is going to cancel out the reduction. So the Gemara says, why do we say? It says that if it is wheat and rice, it depreciates by or reduces by 9.5 kavin. But we say oris tuva chaser, rice, you lose more of it. Why is it only 9.5 kavin? It's Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Boris Kalav Shalom. Now this amount was talking about peeled rice. But if the rice was not peeled, yeah, then it'd be much greater. So l'kusmin u'zerapishtin, shlosha sein l'kor. If it would be spelt or flaxseed, then it would be 3 seah for the core. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Chia, zerapishtin begiv owen shanu. That when do we say that this is the amount, this flaxseed, when it's still in its husks to dry, and you still have to take out the beans, and so therefore it's greater amount of reduction. However, if it's outside of the husks, it's much less. And indeed, yeah, when do we say it's this amount? When it's the rice is unpeeled and the flaxseed and the spelt are still in their husks. Then it's shlosha sayin l'kor. Then it's 3 seah for the core. So hakol fi amida, hakol fi azman. So according to Tanakama, everything goes proportional. Tana ken l'kol kor v'kor. And indeed, we learned that it's taught for every core you deduct this amount. For every year you keep reducing it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan says, what do the mice care? They're going to eat what they're going to eat. So the Chama said for Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Tanya, Amar lo Rabbi Yochanan, even if the mice don't eat more, nevertheless, harbe ovdos mehen, v'harbe mispazros mehen. Meaning to say, if there's more fruits, you need to reduce more, because there you lose more and it gets scattered more. So of course you're going to have to reduce more. So the Gemara says, when does our Mishnah say that he can deduct it? When can he reduce the return, what he has to return? Only in a circumstance she'irvan in peirosav, where the shomer mixes them with his own fruits, and so therefore you're not going to know exactly how much of his own fruits were reduced and how much were the fruits of the person whose deposit he was watching. But if he puts the guy's fruits in his own corner, well, then he just gives it back to him, obviously. He says, here's your fruits, I'm giving it back to you. Gemara says, "V'chiyerban and perus of my avi." What does it matter if he mixes it up with his own fruits? Why would that make a difference? You could say, and I should see how much of I had of mine, and then I'll know how much of yours were missing. Gemara says, meaning to say, he'll say how much of his own fruits were there, and then I'll see how much it went down. So the Gemara said, no, but mistapek mayhem. No, he's eating from it the whole time, and so therefore he doesn't know how much of the ones that remained were his, and how much were from the person who deposited it. Well, I'll say kame stop. Why doesn't he know how much he ate? He doesn't know what he ate. Okay, next case, Rabbi Yehuda says if it was a large amount, then he doesn't take out the reduction because we're going to say that the same way it was reduced, it also swelled up. Kama mida, but what's considered a large amount? So Amar Rabba Barachana Rabbi Yochanan Asara Korin, 10 kor is a large amount. Tanya Nami Achai Kama mida Meruba. We also learned in the Brisa like what's a large amount? Like Rabbi Yochanan taught Asara Korin, 10 kor. Tani Tana Kamed Rav Nachman Bamed Harma. When do we say this teaching? And at the position of Rabbi Yehuda that it swells up in the since it's a large amount, it'll also swell up, so we don't reduce it. No, that when the watchman accepts the fruits, he measured it in a measuring utensil that was very great and was found in the threshing floor. And when he returns it to also mitol korano, he also returns it to him with that same measuring tool. But if when he returns it to him, when do we say this law? When he returns it to him from using the same measuring tool that he had in the granary. But if when he gave it to him, he gave it to him with a measuring tool in the granary, and he returned it with a tool from the measuring utensil from his house. He does not reduce anything because meaning to say the measuring utensil that's found in the house is smaller than the measuring utensil that's found in the granary. And so when he returns to him a smaller measure, more than he received it. And so therefore, he's returning to him in a smaller measure than he received it. And so therefore he doesn't, and therefore he doesn't reduce anything. That's the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda. So do you think our Mishnah is talking about fools? That he's taking a large utensil and returning it in a small utensil? That doesn't make any sense. So that doesn't make sense. So what we have to say that there's something else going on here. Dilma being Mosagor and Kamras, meaning to say during the days of the granary, meaning to say when do we say you get to reduce something? Shemadadol be Mosagoran, when you're returning it to him during the days of the granary. That he measured it for him in the days of the granary. The Hechzer will be Mesagoran. It means the same time of the year. But if he gave it to him during the days of the threshing floor, but he took it back during the days of the rain, and then he doesn't reduce anything because it swells up in the rainy season, so then he can't return it. Amrle, Papa Abayim Cain. Well, if it's your argument that whenever it's the rainy season, whatever you have will swell, if that's the case, Lifka Kada, then the barrel should break. Gemara says, indeed, there was a fact, Upaka Kada. Indeed, the barrel broke. That's what happens. The barrel break because in the rainy season it expands. Mishum Itzitza. No, the barrel's not going to break because it's going to be so pressure. It's a pressure. The pressure is not going to let it break because it's all packed in and there's no space for it to expand at that point. So because of the pressure, it won't break. Now our Mishnah says we're going to continue. Okay, previously we were discussing wheat and barley and rice and millet, but now we say, what about wine? Okay, so if you have wine and he gave him wine and he also mixed his own wine, yotzilo shtus. So the person who's watching the wine should reduce 1/6 from the amount of the wine that he deposited him. Yotzilo shtus liyayin. Because wine diminishes like by the fact that it gets absorbed into the containers. It diminishes by 1/6. Rabbi Yehuda says chomesh 1/5. Let's say he does oil. Yotzilo shlosha lugin shemen l'meya. That if you gave him 100 lugin of oil, you have to reduce it by 3, which is lugul mechza shmarm, which is 1.5 lug because of the dregs, and lugul mechza bela, and 1.5 lugin because it was absorbed in the jars. Imaya shemen mizukak. Let's say it was clear oil, then there's no dregs there. Eno yotzi lo shemarim. Then you're not going to reduce it on account of the dregs, because for clear oil, there's no dregs. If it's old jars, eno yotzi lo, you're not going to reduce any of the reduction of the bella, of absorbing, because the old jugs don't absorb. Rabbi Yehuda says, Af amocher shem mezukah kol chavero, kol yemos hashana, harei ze mekabel of lugul mechsa shemar mumea. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if somebody sells him refined oil the whole year, meaning to say that the oil is with, in this circumstance where the oil is with the seller, and the person is going to come and take from it, a little bit by a little bit the whole year. Meaning to say, if he pays for 100 lug, he only really gets 98.5 lug. He's accepted upon himself that if he pays for 100 lug of oil, he's only going to take 98.5, because it's either absorbed or because of the dregs. We'll see. The Gemara is going to discuss it. Gemara says, well, the Tanakh and Rabbi Yehuda are not arguing. They both agree that the amount of wine that's reduced is the same. But Marki Asri. Everything is going according to the custom of each place. But Asri Demar, in the place of the Tanakh, where what they would do is they would line the barrels with wax, and so then the barrel would not absorb a lot, and so therefore they only reduce it by a 6. But Asri Demar, in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, Chafu Bekufra, they would line the barrels with tar, and so the barrels would absorb more, and so therefore they said you're menakem by a 5th. By a zemar, alternatively, Mishum, what's the reason why Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda have different amounts? One says a 6th and one says a 5th. Mishum Gargishta, because of the soil that was in their place. The soil in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, they made pottery barrels, mitzitzatfei, it would absorb more, and so therefore you reduce it by a 5th. And the soil of the Tanakama, didn't absorb as much, so you only reduced it by a 6th. Ba'asrei de Rabbi Yehuda, and the Gemara brings an incident which can be explained from our Mishnah. Ba'asrei de Rabbi Yehuda, Ramu Arbaim, Betamne Kuze Bedana. They had a small measurement, which was called a kuza, and there were their entire barrel was filled up from 48 kuzim. And Azil Dana Beshita Zuze, and the barrel, on the price of the barrel and when they harvested the wine was 6 zuzim. So Paris Rabbi Yehuda Shita Shishta Bezuza. Rabbi Yehuda was a shopkeeper. When he sold the wine at the end of the year, he would sell 6 kuzim of wine for a zuz. Okay, we'll see what happened. So the Gemara explains how did he make his profit? So Dal Tlasin Vishita. So take away 36 the first 36 kuzim bishita, and for each one he received 6 zuz, and that was the price that he bought the barrel for. And so now from these 48 zuzim, so pashu lahu tracer. So he has, since he sold 36 for a total of 12 zuzim, of 6 zuzim, he now is left 12. Dal tamya shesu. So take from them 12 kuzim, take 8 kuzim. For which are absorbed. Pashu arba. He has 4 zuzim left, and so therefore that was his profit. 4 kuzim of wine, that was his profit of Rabbi Yehuda. Gemara says, but how can you make 4 kuzim of wine on one barrel? How could that be a profit? You're not allowed to make more than a 6th, and so you're allowed to make a 6th. And if that's the case, why is Rabbi Yehuda making less than a 6th? He should be making more. So the Gemara says, Ika gulpi ushamaria. There's also a profit with the selling of the jar itself and the selling of the dregs. If that's the case, that you're making a profit with the selling the jar itself and the dregs, not he's now making more than a 6. The Gemara says, Ike tircha udmei barzanai. Yeah, there are other expenses that he's charging for. He's charging for his labor, basically, and also the amount he had to pay to open up the barrel. And so therefore he's paying more. He was paying the amount he made, even though it was more than a 6, he had other work that was involved, and so therefore that he could deduct for, and therefore was exactly a 6, just like Shmuel taught. It said in the Mishnah, if it was clear oil, then he can't deduct for the dregs. Gemara says, But so even though it's old jugs, it's impossible that it'll still at least absorb a little bit. What do you mean? Of course, it'll absorb a little bit. Why doesn't he reduce at all for the absorption? So Amrav Nachman bim mizufafin. Now we're talking about the oil that was covered with the barrel was covered with tar, the mizufafim shanu, and that doesn't absorb at all. And Abai says afilu tema shalobim mizufafim. If it wasn't buried, covered at all with tar, keeping the tar and taman, since the old jars have absorbed, once they've absorbed, they're done and they don't absorb anymore. We're in the middle of 40b. Rabbi Yehuda says also somebody who sells clear oil to his friend the whole year, he's able to absorb upon himself. So if somebody sells clear oil to his friend the whole year, he accepts upon himself that there's going to be 1.5 dregs of oil out of 100. Amar Abaye kishatim saloma udivri Rabbi Yehuda. So when you're going to investigate this matter closely, according to the position of Rabbi Yehuda, you're going to see that if somebody sells to his friend plain oil and clear oil, mutar la'arev shmarim, you're allowed to mix in the dregs with the oil, and you're allowed to give him some of the dregs. Udivri chachamim atzar la'arev shmarim, but the chacham say you can't. He has to give him clear oil. Divri Rabbi Yehuda mutar la'arev shmarim. What does Rabbi Yehuda say? You're allowed to mix in the dregs with the oil. Hainu taima. The mekabel, that's the reason that the one who is purchasing the oil is accepting upon himself that he's not going to get the full 100%. He's going to get 1.5 dregs with it. Because the seller could say to the purchaser, if I would have wanted to mix in the dregs in the oil, I could do it. And so therefore, hashtanami, so now, even when I didn't, kabil, accept upon yourself 1.5 dregs out of 100. So, well, why doesn't the purchaser say back to the seller, yeah, if you would have been mixing the dregs in the oil, you would have given me 100 lug of oil that's not clear. I would be able to sell the dregs. Hashta my avidway. Now what am I going to do with them? The dregs by themselves, I'm not able to sell. And so therefore, what am I going to do? So the Gemara says, no, we're talking about a Baal Bais Askinan, no, we're talking about a person who's not a salesman. And it's just like a regular person who's getting oil, so he likes it clearer. And so therefore, the purchaser can accept upon himself to accept less oil because it's clear. Fine. So the Gemara says, but why doesn't the Baal Bais say to the seller, midolo araftuli, from the fact you didn't mix it in for me, achuli achaltuli, you reveal to yourself that you are waiving your rights to it, and so therefore you have to give to me 100 lug of oil. That's clear. You waived your rights. You have to give me the full thing. Gemara says, no, we don't accept that. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't agree that you could waive your rights. It's not. Going to the Mishnah Bava Metzia. So this is the cases. A seller sells to the purchaser the yoke for the oxen. It's not. We say that if he purchases the yoke, he hasn't purchased the cattle, because the cattle are not subservient to the yoke. And also, if he sells him the cattle, he hasn't sold him the yoke. But whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, Hadam and Modian, the money that he spends lets us know what's going on. Let's say he says, sell me your cattle for 200 zuz. Everybody knows you don't buy a yoke for 200 zuz. And so therefore he certainly only intended to buy the cattle. And that's all he intended to sell. Says the amount of money is not a proof, because maybe he only wanted to buy the yoke. And so he's waiving his rights to the seller for the extra money. And so we see from here that according to Rabbi Yehuda, if he says that we don't say that we assume that he waived the rights, unless they do it explicitly. According to Chachamim, you're not allowed to mix in the dregs. Ainu time of the woman kabel. This is the reason why the purchaser does not accept upon himself the extra dregs. The Amrway Yibayas Haruve Miavi Sharach. He said, if I would have wanted to mix it, would not have been. If you would have wanted to mix it, would not have been permitted. Therefore, Hashta Nami woman kabelana. Therefore, I'm not going to take less than the 100. You have to give me 100 clear of oil. It's just the opposite. You're according to Chum, you're allowed to mix in the dregs. That's why he doesn't accept the dregs. He says, from the fact that you didn't mix it to me, and from the fact that you didn't, you revealed to yourself that you waived your right. So, Rabbi Yehuda, also our Shemar. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not allowed to mix it. And this is the reason why the person who accepts upon himself the lug, we're going to have for Shemar, the Amar way, you weren't allowed to mix it. So therefore, and so therefore, even if you accept upon yourself this extra lug, I would have no profit. So therefore, I wouldn't have sold it to you. Zibun v'zaben tagrik, you mean to say you're going to go purchase and sell without a profit? So therefore, there's nobody's going to sell without a profit. And it's obviously the case that the purchaser knows that he needs to accept upon himself this extra lug and a half of dregs. So therefore, we see from our Mishnah the law of shmarim and bela, the law of, we assume that there's some dregs involved in every sale and some absorption. So the Gemara says, well, what about the pekatim? What is the pekatim? This is the residue that comes off of the pits, and they float on the top of the oil. It's called pekatim. So Tana echad alokech ve'echad amafkid, whether the person is a purchaser or a depositor, the same law with respect to pekatim. What does it mean they have the same law? If you want to say, just like the purchaser, he says, I don't want any pekatim, and the seller has to give him oil without pekatim. So to the mafkin nami lo mekabel pekatim. So to a depositor gets his deposit back, he has to give it to him without the pekatim. That can't be. Why? The shomer, the watchman, could say to the depositor, "What am I going to do with your pekatim? This is your oil, and it's your pekatim." So we say it's just the opposite. Just like the person who's a depositor, he has to take back his pekatim. Anytime you purchase something, you assume that there's going to be some pekatim involved. It's like the pekatim is like when you buy, let's say, a soda or a beer, there's some froth at the top. You're going to get some of the stuff there. So the Gemara says, wait, does the lokech, is he really going to get some pekatim? When did the Chachamim say that you get the shemen achor, that you get the dirty oil on account of the pekatim? Only for a seller, for the seller, meaning to say, you have to give him pure. You have to give the purchaser refined oil, meaning to say that the loss as a result of the shmarim is on the seller and not on the purchaser. So how can we say that the Bryce is talking about that just like the mafkid has to take back his pekatim, so too the purchaser has to take it? So the Gemara says, Lokasha. Adi Yavway Zuze B'Tishrei because Shakumine B'Nisan Kimide de Tishrei. Adi Yavway Zuze B'Nisan because Shakumine B'Nisan Kimide de Nisan. The Gemara says the Brisa. So meaning to say, the Brisa that says that the purchaser is like the depositor and that he has to accept the pekatim. That's where he gave him money in Tishrei, and he takes the oil from him in Nisan, like the measurements of Tishrei. But where in Tishrei, the oil is cheaper because it's mixed with the pekatim. And under these circumstances, the purchaser has to accept the pekatim. But if he gave him the money in Nisan, and he's taking the oil in Nisan, you assume, and in Nisan there's no pekatim there, so the oil is more expensive. And so therefore, assuming he's buying it at that time of the year without any of the pekatim. So now we come to the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Amafkid chavis eitzel chavero. Somebody deposits a barrel with his friend. Below yachdu ba'al makom, and the below yachdu ba'al makom, and the the owner who deposits it, he doesn't say, I want you to put in this specific place. The tiltal and the watchman moves it, v'nishdabra, and it broke accidentally. Imi toch yado, nishbara, if it was the watchman's, if as he was moving it, he broke it, litzorcho, and it broke because he wanted to use it, chayiv, then he has to pay. But litzorcho, but if he was moving it for the barrel's own needs, potter is exempt. After he put it down, it broke. It doesn't matter why he moved it, for his own needs or for its needs, potter. It's going to be exempt. Let's say the owner said, no, put it there. If it tilted of an ishpara, and he moved it and it broke, it doesn't matter if he moved it for its own needs, he's going to be responsible. But if he moved it for the needs of the barrel, because if it was where it would break, then he's going to be exempt. So the Gemara says, we're going to have to discuss this Gemara, God willing, tomorrow night. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it tomorrow night, but we'll see. We'll take up the next stuff as soon as we can. Shkoyach.